Alright guys, welcome to the first session. This has been an idea of mine that I've wanted to do for a long time now, and it's something that has kind of, I guess, been put on hold and then kind of put off hold, and kind of, it's just been something that's kind of been pushed around a lot, and I'm just glad that finally this event can kind of go ahead, and it's the kind of thing that I'm going to be holding from week to week. And the idea is that you guys come along, I talk quickly about some particular aspect of game, or an interesting topic, or something that I'm working on, a particular technique or tactic or something like that. I have a bit of a chat, and then one of my wings, Urbanist, who you probably know from the Saturday Sarge, and I'm sure you've seen him around. He's always on the streets of the West End, and he's going to give a quick chat about what he kind of does best, which is knowing like really great first date locations and really interesting kind of bars and restaurants and stuff that you can kind of take girls on instant dates and first dates. So he's going to have a bit of a chat about that, as well as some of his kind of favourite Sarging routes around the West End. London's one of those cities where you can really there's so many places to go, and I guess it's easy when you're sarging around the West End and the city and stuff to kind of fall into the pattern of the same kind of routes to take. And on one hand, that's great, that idea of familiarity. I find that actually helps me in sets, just as a bit of an aside, knowing exactly what kind of street I'm on, and where, if I see a girl turning left onto a street that I know is a bit quieter and it's a dark kind of alley, then obviously I'm going to make an effort to approach it beforehand, because I have that familiarity with the place. But I think there's a lot of value in kind of exploring new areas, especially those kind of smaller places. There was a couple of weeks ago, over a month ago now, when we had Yad come to the Saturday Sarge and have a chat with you guys. We went to Neil's Yard, which is a place that I'm not really that familiar with, and Faz knows it well, and it's just a great little place to take girls on instant dates and stuff. It's kind of this quaint, small kind of little courtyard with the cobblestones and stuff. And it's kind of weirdly kind of colourful and a bit hippie. And it's like a 5-minute stroll from Covent Garden. And you just never know about it until you know to turn left down that weird side street, and it kind of opens up into the courtyard. So anyway, so Faz is going to talk a bit about that after me. The third part of this evening is all about you guys. So you guys kind of, the idea is that you guys will we'll kind of talk about some of your the issues that you guys have been having on the streets, because I know guys kind of tend to run into sometimes the same issues, or sometimes they deal with whatever issue or sticking point they have and they move on to something else. And I just want to kind of get you guys in the habit of discussing that, verbalizing those issues, and also then the other side of that is starting to set some goals around how to get past those issues that you have, what we call sticking points in the community. So that's kind of how it's going to be structured, and hopefully at the end of that third part, I'll also be giving you guys a bit of coaching around some techniques that you can use to kind of make sure that you are hitting those daily challenges and stuff that you set yourself. So I'm going to get started with something, a topic that I've kind of had percolating in the back of my mind for a while now, and it's just something that has kind of over the last week since I got back from the States, it's really kind of been playing on my mind as I've gotten back into teaching again and stuff after my break. And it's something that's definitely coming up a lot on the street. And it's this idea of it's this idea of sarging between the tens. It's a really important concept. Especially the last couple of students I've had, the first question I always get asked by them is, how can I get good quickly? What's the thing that you see that guys that get good quickly do? And this one concept of sarging between the tens kept coming up for me. So I thought I'd have a brief discussion about it now. So one of the issues that I'm seeing on the streets, it happens a lot on the Saturday side. You see this a lot, and when you do start to see this, please do something about it. So it's this idea of being very inefficient when you're on the streets, sarging. I'll see a lot of guys walking around, with their wings or on their own, but in particular with wings, when they're with more than one other person. and they'll be kind of walking around the West End, you know, all through the major places, Covent Garden, Chinatown, Leicester Square, Piccadilly Circus, etc., etc. And they'll just burn hour after hour, just kind of letting, you know, decent-looking girls, like what we would kind of consider, I don't know, a 7, or a 7.5, letting those go and just waiting for their particular type of girl, you know. So, you know, there's a lot of guys. Faz has a fetish for Asians. So, you know, he'll just be waiting for just the Asians, or there's some guys that will be waiting for whatever their kind of their flavour of woman is, and just letting, you know, like sometimes 10, 15, 20 girls go by in the space of an hour or 2 hours, and then kind of just you know, hitting on the girls that they're super into. Now, the thing that I wanted to talk about specifically with this is this idea that you should obviously never let the ones that you're really into go. Never let them go. That's a given. I'm not trying to trample on that kind of territory at all. That's definitely something you have to do, and that's basically what we got into the game for. One of the things is to chase after the girls we want. But in between that, this is where it gets interesting, because this is where the guys that I see get really good have a different mindset and a different approach to this than the guys that take a lot longer to get good, regardless of where they're starting from. I don't seem to see any kind of pattern with where guys start from and how fast they progress. It's all about the attitude. So if you adopt this mindset of sarging in between the 10s, so between the girls that you find really attractive and that you would go for anyway, just consider this idea of approaching semi-hot girls. So if we're going to get really kind of into the lingo here, like the 6.5s up to the 7.5, kind of 8 range, whatever that is for you, the chances are, if you're just starting out in this, or if you're intermediate at this whole game, there's a good chance that you're letting them go. And you're using that as an excuse to not approach them, you know. And there's also a very good chance that when the really hot girls that you really want to approach are coming, you're also making an excuse about that. But that's a whole different story that I'll cover later. So this idea of honing the skills that it takes to get a really hot girl that you're actually into, it actually takes a lot of sets, and it also takes a lot of sets that might not actually be the ideal girl for you at that moment in time. Things like things that I teach on a daily basis to my students, so things like strong eye contact, all kinds of body language kind of nuances, verbal kind of conversational skills, vocal tonality, silences, and slowing down when you speak. Those little things are the things that you really need to have down and internalize. Not just when talking to girls, just with everyone, you know, you need to have control over that stuff. And so some guys have control consciously, some guys have control subconsciously. But the guys that come to me for training, they need to have control over that on a conscious level to some extent, especially in the beginning. And I guarantee you, you can't master control over those kinds of things if you're only practicing them on the hot girls. You just won't. You will over time, but the time that it will take for you to master that by only approaching the hot girls and practicing that stuff is not on a time scale that you want to be dealing with in terms of picking up the skill set. I hope that makes sense. That was a really roundabout way of saying that you should be practicing these kind of smaller techniques and stuff on basically anyone, on pretty much anyone, you know. I sometimes get objections around this, some legitimate ones, like I don't want to open a girl sexually direct if I'm not that into her. That again is debatable, and I'll get onto that a bit later on. But even if you just put that one thing aside of being too overly sexual with a girl that you're not actually into, let's put that aside for a second. All the other things, like eye contact, which again, just quickly, is a very subconscious autopilot thing. The way your eye contact works and the way you tend to use eye contact is something that you might think you might have it handled, but you really don't. I mean, the large percentage of students I have that say that they've got it handled, and then when I show them all kinds of stuff around eye contact in set, they're just like, Okay, obviously there's a lot more to this, and that's just eye contact. There's a lot more to all these things. And so this idea of sarging between the 10s is really important, because when you approach a girl, say that's a 7, you tend to be, it's a little bit easier to control yourself and what you're doing in front of girls that you feel a little bit more entitled with. And so that means that when you approach these kind of 7-ish kind of girls, I really recommend that you pick one thing, so one of those things. I'm picking on eye contact, but let's just go with eye contact for a second. If you just pick eye contact for the next 40 minutes of your sarging session, you just say, look, I'm going to, obviously with the 10s, the girls that I really am attracted to, I'm going to approach them and do as best as I can. In between the 10s, I'm going to approach anything between, anything from a 7 up, I'm going to approach, right? And I'm going to concentrate only on eye contact. So when I go up, I'm going to try and hold eye contact, for the first 0 to 5 seconds. Within that first 5-second block, really focus on holding that eye contact, And if you can go further. I say for my beginner students that are just starting out, 5 seconds for them is an eternity to hold solid eye contact. They've probably never done that in their lives with anyone, or very few people. But just work on that and try and hold it as long as possible, And really, you do this like 5, 6, 7 sets in a row with the kind of 7s and the 6s, the ones you feel more entitled with. You do that, and you'll start to internalize it. It'll start to become automatic. And the idea is that you start to raise the minimum for what how you use eye contact and how good your eye contact is. Your minimum, your baseline for that raises. And obviously, if you multiply this over however many sarging sessions that you have in a week or a month or a year, your baseline will go up and permanently stay there. I found that in particular with my eye contact for sure. Once I started to really do this, with all the kinds of sets that I was approaching when I was really working on this, I just noticed that my baseline went up through the roof. And after a while, after about a month or so, it got cemented in place. Then you know what? When I started approaching the really hot girls, where usually my game would fall apart, because with a really hot, like a 10, you don't have that kind of presence of mind to control all that stuff. It's almost by definition, that's what the hot girls kind of do to you, They really throw you off your game. And anyone who's approached an absolute stunner in a club or on the street will know this, that it's hard enough just to approach, let alone to actually get in front of them and start talking to them. And once you get into it, it's kind of okay. But I found for me, and I've seen in a lot of my students now, that if you can't get those first few little bits right, then the set's pretty much done. The game is lost. And eye contact was one of those things that once I got that down, especially in the first 5 seconds of the interaction, when I could just hold solid eye contact and not like flinch, quickly look away or anything like that. All my sets were working, all of them. And yeah, the point I was trying to make was, to get back to my original point, this idea that the way I learned this was actually by sarging between the 10s. So not letting those semi-hot girls go by, but actually kind of using them to develop these skills and raise my baseline with all kinds of things. I think that's a really important point, and that's something that I see time and time again. Guys have been very inefficient on the streets with this and kind of practicing on their 10s, which is really heartbreaking to see, because when the 10s come along, you want to be ready for that. You don't want to use them as practice. There's a great analogy that I was thinking about the other day, and I want to get this right, so I'm going to read my notes quickly. So imagine a football team, right? So when you approach the 10s, or your 10s, whatever you consider to be hot, consider that like when a football team plays a match, an actual match at a stadium, a Wembley Stadium or whatever, right? That's analogous to a match. So the semi-hot girls, so the ones that are like the 6.5 to kind of 8-ish range, the ones that you kind of look and go, I'm not sure if that's worth chasing, those kind of girls, consider that the training session, right? That's the training session that's the stuff that you're doing midweek. I used to play a lot of football soccer in Australia, and so we would train on Wednesday and Thursday night. And so those semi-hot girls are training on Wednesday and Thursday nights, right? Now, think of the players as all those little aspects of the game. Physical, verbal, and everything else, right? So eye contact, figuring out logistics, the physical approach itself, the vocal tonality, the speed of your voice, the depth of your voice, all these things, right? All those things are the players. Now, the last thing you want to do is basically make the really hot girls that are actually the matches. You don't want to turn them into the training sessions. That's basically what you're doing when you let the semi-hot girls go and you get forced to practice on the hot ones. You don't want to do that. You want to use the semi-hot girls as your training sessions so that your players can start to develop their skills and all those small things, you know, where you have a bit more control and you have a bit more presence of mind, you know. There's nothing worse than trying to scamper up that steep hill, you know, like trying to train on the really hot girls because you can't concentrate on anything, you can't work on anything, you're too out, you know, you're not there, you're not even present in the conversation with them, if you approach at all. So just keep that in mind when you're on the streets. I'm not trying to say don't sarge the tent. I just want to make that clear because sometimes I've mentioned this concept to students in passing and I just don't want it to be misconstrued as don't approach tents. Absolutely approach the tents. There's no excuse to not approach them, and you would obviously give up approaching anything lower than a 10 for a 10. All I'm trying to get across here is this idea that between them, because especially West End, Central London, whatever, there's not like 10 tens in a row just passing on a conveyor belt, is there? So just get it straight in your head that I'm just trying to say that between the tens, be approaching everything else, you know, or everything that's within range, you know. The other thing that I think is really great about sarging between the tens, and it's something that you will kind of have to do for yourself to be able to prove it to yourself. It's this idea of lifting your state firstly. It'll either keep your state steady or lift it from where it is, because, you know, especially when I just finished a whole day of work and I head out on the streets with wings and stuff, and I don't feel like a project, you know, I just don't. And so for me, I start to use this excuse of, okay, I'm waiting for the hot girl, I'm waiting for the 9 and the 10 to show off, and then I'll start, and then they'll kickstart me into gear, and then from there I'll have an amazing training session. No, it doesn't work, and when it does, it's always the exception to the rule. That situation, in normal circumstances, it doesn't work, and I really don't want you to fall into that mindset because you'll just get frustrated like time after time. And so this idea of sarging between the tens is great for that, because it will once you do it, regardless of whether it went well or not, if you've done a few cold approach street sarges, you'll know that even a couple of sets, no matter how they go, does lift your state. Even if they're 7.5s. It's totally fine. Approach them, get started, and socially warm up. You know, you need that social lubrication. And it's much easier to get that in a club than on the street. It's your responsibility to take control of that yourself and start this whole sarging between the tens concept, you know. Great, and also, actually, and lastly, and the whole idea of AA, you will keep AA at bay as well. I mean, that goes hand in hand with the state thing. So just keep that in mind when you're out there and you are making that excuse of, okay, I'm going to wait for, you know, the 9 or the 10 to arrive. Just keep that in mind that that it is an excuse and that you're there to sarge. You're there to get a skill set, and the skill set is something that takes a slightly different approach to getting a girlfriend or a relationship. To some extent, if you're just in it for the relationship/girlfriend thing, you can always play a numbers game and be quite successful and pick one up if that's what you're after. Just for the, I don't know, the emotional experience or the relationship experience, if that's what you're after, go for it, fine. But if you are, what I tend to see is the majority of guys that want that longer term benefit out of this and the skill set out of this, you're going to have to approach it in the sense that you're trying to build a skill set, which means that you can't always approach the hot girls, and you absolutely cannot be affording to just approach the hot girls and kind of train on them. You can't afford to do that. And that's why, again, this idea of sarging between the tens is so important. I just want to reiterate that the biggest question that I keep getting is this idea of this question of when students ask me, what are the guys that are getting really good at this, what are they doing? And this is absolutely in the top 5. Absolutely in the top 5. And just notice how this has nothing to do with any of the specific nitty-gritty kind of grassroots tactics kind of stuff, you know. It's got nothing to do with that. It's just a mental attitude. That's essentially all that we're talking about here is your approach, your mental attitude to this whole thing. And I think it's super important. It's super important. In closing, I just want to reiterate that main point about sarging between the tens. So, firstly, how to get good quick. I think this has got to be my top 5 techniques, or I guess mental attitudes. Is this idea of approaching between the tens. And it's something that you can apply the whole time. It's completely universal to any kind of game that you're thinking about doing or that you're doing now. You know? What I like about it is it's super efficient, and I find it to be a lot more fun as well, because you just don't know who you're going to meet in between, whether it's just someone cool and funny, or if it's just someone random, or it's just a great story, or if it's actually genuinely someone that has a great personality and is kind of hot, and you start to see them and they grow on you, etc., etc. You never know. What I also like about it that I guess appeals to a lot of guys is this idea that it's very systematic, you know. So this idea that, like I was saying before, like if you're going to sarge between the tens, you know, some guys tend to struggle for motivation between that. With that idea of approaching girls that aren't so good. So turn it into not work, but just as a way of just dealing with all the issues that you have dealt with yet. You know, so if you know that eye contact is an issue, get some training, get an idea of exactly what you're doing right and wrong in a set, and then have a list of those things. You know, of exactly what you're doing wrong. And when you're sarging between the tens, start at the top of the list. You know. One of the guys that I had last week speaks way too fast instead, way too fast. I mean, for him, I was telling him that when he's out there and he's sarging, you know, just set that 2-hour time frame. I'm going to sarge for 2 hours, and I'll obviously stop every 9 and 10 that I see, but in between those, I'm going to work on slowing down the set. I want to talk so slow that the girl gets confused and thinks that I've stopped talking, you know. Go for that as a goal, you know. Maybe not for the 9s and 10s, because you actually want them to, you know, think you're normal and funny and whatever else, and then you want to close them properly and have a decent connection. But for the other ones, for the 7s and you know 8s, start to push the boundaries. You know, if you start to do if you stack 3, 4, 5 of these kind of in between the 10 kind of approaches, your AA will drop significantly. It'll drop significantly. Next time I want to talk about AA a little bit, but I've got this concept of AA being this thing where it's like a curtain, right? And so if I'm actually me, and this curtain is in front of me, you can't see me. That's the AA. That's the shield, or I guess the kind of the wall between the outside world and myself. And so when you start to stack these approaches up in succession, it's actually you essentially pulling that curtain open for a little bit, you know. And that's really what we're trying to do here, is if you can really stack up that many approaches in a row really quickly with 7s and 8s, like yours you feel entitled with, or entitled to, you pull that curtain open, and then you can really get in there and do some work, you know. And when I mean do some work, I mean you can really start to then control the way you talk, because you're not that invested in what they're going to think about you or say in return. And that's when, if you do that in, say, a few days in a row, or within a week's period, if you do it a handful of times, you'll start to cement that concept. You'll start to pull open the curtain for long enough to go in there and tinker with whatever it is you're working on, you know. And then you know, obviously the curtain then closes again, the air kind of comes back if you don't approach for a little while. And then obviously you need to start again, you need to get those approaches up, and then we can pull it, get in there again. So just keep this concept in mind. I think it's amazing. And if you can do this consistently and keep it up, it will transform your game for sure.